How do I choose my needle for embroidery? Well, there's one needle specifically for embroidery, which is an Embroidery 7511. A lot of people don't use them. A lot of people actually use other needles for their machine because they think they are better. But the real answer is this needle, Embroidery 7511, has been made for an embroidery machine, to do embroidery on an embroidery machine, to cope with embroidery threads, whether they're rayon or polyester or metallic. It has been designed for it specifically. So when we look at a needle, I mean, so you can't see this, but we have the trunk of the needle, and then we have a groove down the front of it, and then the groove down the front of it is where the actual thread is going to sit. And the idea is that the groove is supposed to hide the thread as it goes through the fabric. So if you find that your thread is abrading, it may be that your needle was too fine, or your fabric it's going through is clinging on, like rubbers or PVCs or some vinyls. They might actually cling to the needle and cling to the thread, so you need to go up a size. So the groove is really important. I don't know if you can see that, but the eye is quite long, it's elongated. Now when it comes to needles themselves, so I put my needles in, I don't generally use a tool to do that. I put the needle in and I just finger tighten my needle because that's all it requires, but I do have quite a tight finger. Don't screw the screw in all the way. You'll actually chip the tip of the screw and then the needle will fall out in your work. So then we don't want that to happen. We don't want the needle to fall out in the work. So if you're going to choose a needle other than an embroidery needle, the first port of call would be, for me, would be a jeans needle. So we use a jeans 80, so it's an 8012 rather than a 7511 embroidery. Well, we use that because sometimes you'll find that the embroidery needle is just a little bit fine, or if you're going through many layers of PU or satin stitching around PU. Jeans needle, next one up, is actually my next selection. It has got a strengthened middle on it, so it doesn't flex so much. So we use a size 12 jeans needle. Jeans needle and embroidery needles both have the same similar point on them. So they're ballpoint or semi-ballpoint. So they're very much like a jersey ballpoint, not a high stretch ballpoint, because a high stretch has got a full ball on it, whereas these ones have just got a semi. So when it comes to these needles, people say, oh, I'm going to be actually going to embroidery some knit tops. Well, the embroidery needle is quite sufficient to do that because it's already got a ballpoint on it. So you generally don't need to change to a stretch needle unless it's really, really high stretch. Your embroidery stabilizer underneath your work will actually support your top knit fabric, so you're able to actually embroider with the embroidery needle. Some people like to use microtex needles because they've got a really sharp point on them, and they're very thin and they've got a little bit of an elongated eye, and they will penetrate through anything and they'll give a beautiful straight stitch. They're not ideal for embroidery, but some people do like using them, and so that is absolutely fine. So the microtex is very much like a top stitch. It's very, very, very fine tip, and it's quite sharp, and it's classed as being the true sharp in needles these days. Universal used to be the true sharp, but now it is just microtex. When doing text, choosing a needle which is very fine, even finer than your embroidery needle, you may have to go to a microtex needle to do a size 60, which is a size 8 needle, to be used with a 60 gauge thread to give you beautiful stitching, beautiful small stitching, on say a blazer or a badge or something like that, which you want to have the stitching quite readable. Sometimes our normal standard embroidery needle is just a little bit big, and same with the thread, because we use 50 gauge or 40 gauge thread. Using a 60 is that little bit finer, and you'll find that you'll need a smaller needle to do so. Every 8 hours to change your needle. It depends on what you're doing. I must say that I change my needle way more than that. I generally change it per project. Don't generally store a needle. I generally put it into a a sharp spin. I don't usually reuse a needle, don't really need to. It is part of the consumables of running an embroidery machine. Your needles are a consumable, your thread is a consumable, and so is your bobbin case. If you have lost the tip of your needle on your when you're embroidering, it means it's hit something. So hitting something is not very good when it comes to embroidery. So you need to check your bobbin case to make sure that when you have, if you have hit something with your needle, you haven't hit the tip of that, because sometimes you'll find that that little tip there, and that's what catches the thread to make the stitch. If that's gone, you will not have any joy with your machine. So I've seen needles penetrate this, I've seen holes all through here, and also if you use the tip of the needle, it quite often goes down into the race, so the metal bit's called the race, and it will actually gouge the outside edge of this and it'll be rough. So it needs to be smooth for it to work properly. So the bobbin case is a consumable like a needle, a bit more expensive than a needle, but nevertheless it is a consumable. It's not a warranted part on a machine. I really think that the cost of a needle is way cheaper than a visit to the technician to have your machine serviced. It's very rare that a needle break will put your timing out. It can happen, but it's very, very rare. So just covering our bases again, 7511 embroidery needle is made for embroidery. If you veer away from that, you need to have a reason. Going up to an 8012 jeans needle would mean that you're having issues with your 7511, meaning that you may be getting a skip stitch, or your area is too thick, or your embroidery stitches are just not looking good. The most I would go up to in embroidery would probably be a 90. I don't think the machine can cope with anything bigger than that. So a 90 embroidery, you can get a 90 embroidery needle, would be the maximum I would go. If you had to go deeper or bigger than that, then you need to rethink your design. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel.